Welcome to this presentation of the Rotary Club of North Bethesda, Maryland, USA. Our club was established in 1974. We meet every Friday morning at 7:45 a.m., and we often invite guest speakers to give presentations on all kinds of interesting subjects. Please contact us through our website at nbrotary.org. And thanks for watching.
One of Rotary's themes, and the theme for September, is basic education and literacy. And Rotary, of course, has been working on that for many years. So the best person to hear about literacy in Montgomery County is Kathy. She's executive director of the Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy, called MCAEL. Can you pronounce that?
McHale.
McHale's Navy, okay.
Yeah.
She joined McHale in 2012, and she's been there and has greatly expanded their work. She's has years of experience in higher education. She worked as a senior executive in an international nonprofit member organization. She should remain nameless. So.
Not important now.
Not important. She's a fundraiser, a lawyer, community organizer, mediator, very active in Montgomery County. She co-chairs Montgomery Moving Forward, a collective impact group in Montgomery County, and board chair of the Charles Pointer Conservancy for Urban Farming. And then graduate of Leadership Montgomery, and has a JD from University of Richmond and an education degree from Harvard Graduate School. And she likes to go hiking with her dog.
I do?
So,
yeah.
But come on up.
Thank you. Fabulous. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Nice to see you all. It's great to be here. I was saying to Kevin, I don't think I presented to a Rotary since way back in 2018, 2019. Certainly not during the pandemic. So it's a real pleasure to be back in community, in space with people. I'm sure you all feel the same way. So I have a PowerPoint. I don't know if you want to pull that up. Great. Help the folks on Zoom. Good morning, everyone on Zoom. Thanks for being here.
Morning.
In the comfort of your home. So as Kevin said, I'm the executive director of, we call it McHale, Coalition for Connected Community, Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy. And I'm just going to give you some quick background. How many people have heard of the organization before? Kevin. Yes, wonderful. So I'll do a little bit of history for you. We were formed in the early 2000s as an effort from Montgomery County Council, a number of organizations in the county, nonprofits, school system, Montgomery College, to really bring together the multitude of programs that were teaching English to adults at that time. Nothing was coordinated, nothing was collaborative, and the county council, after a study was done and things like that, implemented legislation to form us as the coordinating body for all adult English classes in the county, which I think has proven to be a really good move, because when you have one body, you are able to build a network, to build a system, and to connect people, to use the data, all of those kinds of things that you can't do when you have disparate organizations, basically.
In your presentation, just like the Ron.
Ron, we'll go to the next slide. That's great. Thank you. Perfect. We'll go to the next slide. Yeah. You can go ahead and advance. Thank you. So this just gives a little bit of a visual about who we are and what we do. We're obviously a nonprofit, maybe not obviously, and we are dedicated to enabling all Montgomery County residents to achieve their full potential as citizens, as residents, improving their English language skills. So we're the hub. There are probably, this slide says 70 providers. We probably are down to about 65. Programs shifted and closed during the pandemic. And those are programs, and I'll get to describing a little bit about them in a minute, all over the map in terms of size and makeup and things like that. You can see also from the spokes on this wheel that we work with business partners, we work with nonprofits, we work with faith-based organizations, certainly the local government not only Montgomery County, but City of Gaithersburg, City of Tacoma Park, two examples and that kind of thing. But go ahead, Ron, we'll go to the next. So what do we do? So the programs on the ground are teaching the actual classes. We are a capacity building organization, so we are set up to provide professional development to anyone who's teaching English, whether they're a volunteer instructor, they want to get involved, whether they're a paid instructor. We also provide professional development for all the program administrators, because you can't just say, oh, I'm gonna open an English class and not have any training in it, right? You have to figure out how you're going to recruit students, how you're going to assess the adult learners to see what level they are at, what type of class they should be in, how you evaluate your program. So we provide all of that training and professional development. We also, about 4 years into McHale's existence, which predates me, the county council said, hey, you're the coordinating entity now. We want you to be responsible for all of the funds that we put into granting to these individual programs, because you'll be able to do some evaluation on them, understand where we need to put the money. So this past year, we granted out almost $1.3 million to 28 programs housed in 20 organizations. So some of those organizations you all might know. We grant to Catholic Charities, we grant to CASA, we grant to a church called Center Creek Community Church, we grant to the Vietnamese Americans Association, we grant to the Ethiopian Community Center, and the list goes on and on. All of this is on our website, and you can ask me about other programs and organizations.
So Kathy,
Yeah,
so
please.
that's how you recruit your students? That's how you, through those organizations?
The individual organizations do recruitment now. I'll get to something. What a perfect segue. Workplace and community-based programs. Thank you. Joe, you didn't even know you were doing that. Perfect. We also, while we typically have not done the direct service, the actual teaching, we're finding that there are some holes we can fill in the network, in the system. Not that all the programs out there aren't great, but there's just so much demand and need. So we have partnered with some businesses and some small industries, healthcare, childcare, to provide some direct training to workers in those areas. And we also have a fairly new program as of the last year or two called Community Learning Groups, where we are working directly with small organizations. It might be a group of parents from a school. We recently did a class at a fast food restaurant, a Chick-fil-A in East County, where the manager said, hey, I've got these employees working back of the house, the line cooks in the fast food restaurant that could learn English, and they came to us and we did an 8-week class with them. So while we don't usually directly recruit the students, because that would be a middleman, if you would, we are doing some of these smaller community learning groups to reach adult learners in different places so that they have kind of a safe on-ramp, a safe, secure entry point, and then part of that program, part of those classes, we make sure they know about the other programs to which they can move on after that. So we're building the pipelines in the county for our existing programs. And we're building pipelines of new instructors as well, instructors that may have been English language learners, and we want to train them. Please, Ron, we'll go to the next one. So this, I don't know if you all can see this, my eyes are fuzzy this morning, but this shows the range of McHale programs. Like I said, professional development workshops, we offer free online trainings and courses. We have a foundations for adult ESOL instructors that someone can do online, virtually, on their own time frame, but they're also connected with a cohort of people to talk with and bounce their ideas off of. We publish toolkits. Like I said, we give out capacity building grants, and we give out some very small grants to help launch programs, as well as granting to bigger organizations, like I said, CASA or the Literacy Council, that kind of thing. We also provide technical assistance for programs that want to start up. How do you set up a successful ESOL program? And then, like I just said, we have our McHale managed classes with community learning groups and workplace classes. Ron will go ahead. This just gives a little bit of a timeline about when we were established and the things that came into place with Montgomery College, the task force, when we were incorporated. Montgomery College has always been, and I think will always be, a great partner because After all, we're in the same business, right? Adult education, really. And so we were incubated at the college through their foundation before we got our own separate 501c3 set up, et cetera. And we'll go to the next slide because that's when I came. And I just had my 10th anniversary at the organization, longest I've ever held a job, because I have a variety of interests. And when I started my career, I only wanted to practice law for about 6 or 7 years, so I quickly moved on to that. We're now up to, I've got 8 staff. When I started, we had 1.5 other people. So we've really been able to grow in a very measured way, but also grow in a way that we knew we were meeting the needs of the coalition. Our operating budget's about $1 million, and then you add on, this year we granted out 1.345 million. And we're seen, I think, not speaking immodestly, as a leader in the nonprofit community here in the county. So I mentioned it again, sorry, at least, I don't know if y'all can read that green on the top is hard, isn't it? The type of programs we serve, we serve some dedicated literacy organizations. Y'all might be familiar with the Literacy Council of Montgomery County. They have been in the county for, I think, about 60 years now, doing all literacy. Not only do they work with speakers of other languages, which is really what our programs are geared for, people who are learning to speak and hear English, but then reading and writing. Literacy Council has always had a somewhat of focus on people for whom English is their first language, but for whatever reason they didn't learn to read and write well in school. So they have that component as well. Montgomery College is another example of that. You know, these are really literacy organizations where there's strong infrastructure, part-time, full-time paid staff. And then we have the social service type agencies and organizations, like I mentioned, CASA, Catholic Charities, Spanish Catholic Center, Community Reach, those. There are some other small programs that just fit in niche areas. Rockville Senior Center is one of those. The seniors, come for a variety of different programming. English class is one of those. And then there's some very active faith-based classes at churches and things like that, where the congregation, that's their volunteer work on Sunday after class, after their worship services, that kind of thing. So it's a great variety.
What segment is your largest?
In terms of number of students, number of learners that are served, well, the larger organizations can serve more. So Literacy Council, Montgomery College, the Linkages to Learning program, which you all might be familiar with through the county, is a MCPS, county government program that brings together resources in schools that need. So I'll get to some data points in a second, so that's great. Ron, we can go ahead to the next. So not only are we building this network, providing training and all of that, but we are seen as the go-to organization for making sure that we're engaging the public in the issue of adult English literacy, adult English language learning. Because it's really about the advocacy, the connection, using our data, what we know from these 60 organizations or 60 plus organizations, to engage our government and policymakers in continuing to fund us and engaging other funders in our successes as well. The community at large. Why is it important for people to be able to communicate in English and other nonprofits? And I'll give just a couple examples. Let's see where we can just go, we can put the next slide up. And I'm happy to take questions too. This is my current staff, minus one person who joined us after this picture. We do an annual spelling bee as our fundraiser, where in the past we've had corporate sponsors enter teams to compete. It is one of the most fun events. People say you have to go to a lot of these fundraisers in the county because while you yourself don't have to compete, you're welcome to. People who are gung-ho to do that compete and get to sit in the audience, see if you can spell, and we have some chances for people to spell on their phones on Twitter and win prizes. It's a lot of fun. So here's my staff and I a few months ago in May when we did that. Why do adults want to learn English? There are a variety of reasons. They may want to advance their careers. There's a very poignant story of one of our program directors whose mother passed away because no one in the family, they were swimming, no one in the family had the English to dial 911 and get the emergency response there in time. We were participating this past Saturday. We gave out 400 laptop computers. The county, through a partnership with the county's gotten a federal government grant to bring 40,000 new laptops to the county. We gave out 400. And one of the women there, we were helping her get, not only did they get computers, but we got them Wi-Fi set up and how do you get on the computer, how do you download Zoom. And she was saying to one of our volunteers, help me get to the NCPS website. There's the parent portal where you can see what your child is doing and get information. So there's emergency services, work, helping your kids in school. And as you all probably know from your own lives, right, you can do a telemed appointment, but you've got to have the computer, you've got to have some digital literacy, some English literacy, shopping, registering to vote, all of these things, getting things out of the library. Very, very necessary to have English. And filling out an online form would be a challenge for any of us to speak English. So those are some of the reasons. So just go to the next slide. We'll leave that up. This is now a picture of some of my current board members. So go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about the current status of literacy in Montgomery County? Is it a big issue? Is it a big problem? Is it growing?
Yeah. So again, we focus on the speakers of other languages who are not able to speak fluently or read or write fluently. So the census data suggests that for this population, there's somewhere around 120,000, this is the most recent census, 120,000 adults who self-identify as not being able to speak English. That it's less than they feel like they speak it less than very well.
In the county?
In the county.
Wow.
So sometimes we're our own harshest critics too. So, take that data point. There are somewhere 1.2 million residents in the county, I guess at this point. I don't know what the adult population is off the top of my head.
It's like 10%.
Sorry, just mention the census data.
Yeah.
There's systematic effort within your organization, other organization, to find out actually what the number is. Because that's critical. Because
Yes.
I see the people for the last 10 years who come and work on my yard and my lawn and all that. None of these people speak a word of English.
Mm-hmm.
So is any kind of systematic, and I think that's mostly Hispanic coming from Central America,
Mm-hmm.
and not a single word they can speak.
Yeah.
So is there any systematic studies on how many people really need this?
Yes. Yes, and the answer is yes, and. We try, the county government tries, many nonprofits try. Many of the people who you were referencing who do landscaping work, restaurant work, construction work, those things.
Illegals.
Not necessarily, not necessarily. You're right, some of them may be here without appropriate documentation or paperwork. Many of them don't have time. Pardon me? Oh, I thought I heard something else. Many of them, it is hard to pin them down because they are moving between jobs, moving between residences, things like that. But what we do know, and this is a great data point, is that we are serving almost 15,000 of them each year. So it doesn't, they want to learn English, they are there because their jobs depend on it, they want to do right by their children, they have things that they want to invest, they want to be able to talk to neighbors in the community. And from a business point of view, I don't know if you've found this, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Bob. When any of us are hiring people to work at our homes or communicating with someone at a restaurant or cleaning staff, you want to be able to, they want to be able to speak to you. You want to be able to speak to them. It's just human nature, right, to have that connection. So the data, we feel like the data is very, very important. I'm glad you asked that question. And I don't know if you brought it up or someone else did. Most of the people that we serve in the Spanish-speaking community are Salvadoran. However, we serve people who probably speak 120 different languages. As most of you know, the makeup of the county, our population is very diverse, and we are
a plan, say, like I think going back to David's question,
Yeah.
If they're illegal versus legal, or you serve all the people?
We serve all the people, and we also have citizenship classes too, English to get to citizenship, if that's what someone desires. Joe, please.
So with 15,000 students and $1.3 million budget.
Yeah.
You spend about less than $100 a head on these students,
So-
right?
Yes, and actually, our funding only goes to the grant funded programs. Montgomery College doesn't get our funding, they have their own funding streams. Some of the other programs out there don't get our funding, they have their own funding streams. So it's probably even less than that that's spent.
And your
But-
salaries and everything else.
Yeah, salaries and program, and listen, nobody makes a huge living on being an ESOL instructor. It's part-time work. Even the programs, they're housed in nonprofits, it might be a part-time program administrator. This is not a huge career path, to say the least. Yeah. Kevin,
So my wife and I went to Costa Rica earlier this year,
you're lovely.
and, the bird thing and all that, but what really impressed me was the fact that they say that they have a 99% literacy rate,
Yeah,
and people speak English as well as Spanish,
yeah, it's,
and everybody, I don't know, how do they do that? Or how
Well,
can we
we-
imitate that?
we need to do that. I would say that starts in the public schools, making sure that all of the children in our community, I'm not fluent in another language. Who else speaks another language in here? What's language? Spanish. And good. French? Yeah. Me
And
too.
Gaelic.
I lived in Brazil. I speak Portuguese
Portuguese, wonderful.
with a Carioca accent.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I do, Kevin, I didn't give you a good answer to the question because I don't know what the literacy rate is in the county. I think it's a great question. And I think it's a great question to tie in certainly to NCPS, because we also want to get in front of the parents of children in NCPS, or again, they're.
Yeah, does literacy mean reading as well as speaking?
Great question, I should have said that at the beginning. Literacy, yes, the way we are defining it and the way it's defined in the community that teaches English for speakers of other languages, it is defined on 4 places: speaking, listening, reading, writing. So the traditional way we've talked about for speakers whose first language is English, we've thought about literacy as reading and writing, but literacy is also speaking and listening. And some of the immigrants in our county right now are not literate in their first language. Their education's been interrupted by war or by famine or those kinds of things, and or they've come from a rural country, a situation where they might have lived in a mountain range, something like that, right? So it's very. How am I doing on time? I don't want to overstay my welcome, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, plenty.
Good. All right, good. I did want to mention just a few other things, unless I'm cutting off questions.
The viewers are staring at the slide for a long time.
Yeah, well, that's the end of my slide presentation, so we can take the slides off, yeah. I'm a very minimalist when it comes to number of slides, and not so text heavy, because I think that's a little bit boring. There we are, back to our folks on Zoom, hello. Couple other things I'll mention. So we are a coordinating body, and in Montgomery County, there are a couple other organizations that do coordination of things like this. Arts and Humanities Council coordinates the arts community and the arts grants. Workforce Montgomery coordinates all of the workforce development programs. So in terms of literacy, we see ourselves feeding in certainly to workforce development, into education, into career development, into a whole host of things. So someone asked about our numbers and our cost per learner. It can be very low. There are some programs that also provide concurrent childcare with their classes so that people don't have to find another place for their children to go while they're in class. Some provide some sort of transportation stipends or reimbursements to get on the bus to and from class, that kind of thing. There are classes all over the county. So there are classes in Germantown, Clarksburg, down to Tacoma Park, East County, because again, for all of us know how hard it is to drive somewhere right at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening to get somewhere. We want to make sure that we have classes located where people are, and that's where we really draw on our data. Marrying up to your point, Bob, making sure that we have people where the needs are, where the data is.
So you reach the church or religious organization to these people, or how do you reach out?
They do their own outreach, so they are
So it's
doing,
more, it's not proactive and you are.
it is very proactive on our part because we're providing the information to the organizations. And they do advertising and language newspapers, so the Chinese newspaper, the Spanish newspaper, the radio stations that are in a native language. One of the things we're, kind of working on now and have been working on is with the influx of refugees from Afghanistan, working with the resettlement groups to help bring English at the right time to those people. I've never been resettled as a refugee, but it's, it's incredibly traumatic. And so you want to meet people's, it's a Maslow hierarchy of needs. First, you want to make sure people feel safe, have shelter, have clothing, have food, and then start to figure out how they're going to reboot their lives. And English comes with that, sure.
Our church is helping an Afghan family that came in. That's
Wonderful.
getting resettled in an apartment here.
Yeah,
And I just wondered if you could get in touch with the organization.
Sure.
Somebody to help them with English.
absolutely. We can, I'll make sure anyone who wants it has my card and we can figure out where they're living and get them set up and what the right setup is. There's some
Okay.
one-on-one tutoring and that kind of thing. So so many churches are working with individual families, which is obviously very, very necessary. And I'm sure we'll have some Ukrainian refugees if we don't already, and it's, you want to be, you asked about proactive outreach. You want to do that in a sensitive way. Someone just arrived and doesn't need everybody knocking on their door. Let's do this, let's do that. Again, it's a timing issue and you want to be sensitive.
The funding issue, do you get any funds from the state or from the federal Department of Education?
We do not get federal funding. Most of the federal funding funnels through the state to Montgomery College and the Literacy Council for their direct service, which I think is very appropriate and fine. And the Department of Education, they do have an adult, again, we're focused on the adults, and that's very different than the federal funding that goes to NCPS or our secondary schools. Many people in the adult education world will tell you that adult education is chronically underfunded. I think that's true. If you look around and read things that Barbara Bush Foundation is putting out or that you see from Capitol Hill, it's chronically, it's not, we put a lot of money into secondary education, which is obviously needed, but then there's just not much to go around at the levels. So, I have more that I can share in terms of data, but other questions? Yeah.
I don't see what MCAEL means on here.
Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. That's a great question. It's a long name. We've struggled for years. Do we go by that long name? Or we try to become like Cher or Prince and just go by McHale? So we haven't cracked that nut yet. That's a good question. Thank you. Sure.
My daughter is 64 years old, a school teacher.
Uh-huh.
I've got a cat. And she's in a school that has a lot of folks, children. And the worst frustration is that the linguists can't even read in Spanish.
Right. Yeah, many folks are not literate in their first language. And that is for a variety of reasons, and I mentioned some of those. School hasn't been available for those children in their home countries due to war, famine, different political upheavals that might be going on. Sometimes the socioeconomic conditions in countries like that, the children have to do whatever they can to work to help support the families. It is frustrating, and it is something that we're often asked, could you start to develop programs in Spanish literacy and other literacy issues? And there are some classes throughout the county that do that. It's a heavy lift. It's something that's important. We're trying to figure out how to address that. Luckily for the kids, I don't know what, is she in an elementary school type of setup?
Yeah, she, first to third,
Yeah.
and seems like kind of she's a teacher consultant, and
Sure.
It's frustrating for her because she'll teach a class where the teacher didn't show up.
Yeah.
As opposed to having one class.
Yeah, all those are issues. And what we always say is, if you're literate in one language, it's easier to learn another. And it's easier if you're literate in something like Spanish or French with the alphabet that's similar to ours. If you speak Farsi or Mandarin or Amharic, the alphabet and the characters are very different. So you're learning all these different things. So it is, I hear the frustration, and the only thing we can do is just keep meeting it head on and be grateful that we have teachers like your daughter in the Montgomery County Public School System to handle these things. Yeah. It's a lot of work. A lot of work.
I noticed, my grandson is starting high school in Howard County, but they are teaching Spanish in multiple years
Yes.
in the high schools now. And I think they're trying to get all the kids to have a little Spanish.
I think that's true, and I think that's great. My staff and I are taking a Spanish class once a week now together so that we can increase our fluency. And also, it's just a great reminder of what it takes to learn a language. Because we had class yesterday for an hour. I am probably the most guilty in not having gotten to my homework. But does anyone know, on average, how many years it takes to become proficient as an adult?
3 or
3 or 4? 4 or 5?
Depends what
13.
age.
I'm talking about adults. So let's say somebody in their 30s, 40s. 10. On average, 7 years to become proficient in another language, assuming a certain minimum numbers of instruction and practice during that time. Because that was my point about my homework. I had not done any practice. So I came into class having to switch my brain from English to Spanish. And this just highlights for an adult, picture yourselves. I think I'm safe in saying everybody's past their 30s here. One of a typical learner that the town might have is in their 30s. We have mostly women in our classes, believe it or not. A little over half of our students are women. So you're in your 30s, 40s. You are learning English. You have a child at home. You might have a parent or other family member at home. You need to go to class. Many of our classes try to meet twice a week, but many of them are just once a week. And you have a job. Your spouse, your husband has a job. And you want to learn English. You want to do it as quickly as possible, but your child is sick on the day of class, or your job schedule. This often happens. Your job schedule gets changed. You can't make classes. It's explained to your employer, you need someone on the front lines. Sorry, I can't, it's not like my job where I can make up the time, get on my email at 6 a.m. or something like that. You need to be in front of the customer. So it's a very time-intensive time for people. Not everybody has the time to do it. Or they'll come for a session and then they work in landscaping. And so then there's, folks in landscaping during the summer season, you see them, they're working 12, 14-hour days. There's a time, we often say the main barriers to learning English are time in the day, which we can all appreciate, having been working adults or are working adults. Lack of access to affordable and reliable childcare if you have children and you need care while you're in class. affordable and reliable transportation, get to and from class. So all of these things are factors which I'm sure you can picture in your own lives what constricts you from doing the things that you want to do. Or, and especially if you were, when you were working, I know some of you have shared you're retired, obviously, you know, how that works for you.
Have you attempted to work on Zoom with the class?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. I should have really highlighted. Yes, and we, during the start of the pandemic, you know, like everybody else, we were pedaling fast to figure out what we were gonna do. So many of the programs went to Zoom, Facebook Live, even FaceTime for, you know, for those who have iPhones, you know, individual kind of sessions. Where things have really landed are people are using Zoom, and they still are using Zoom. As you all know, there are benefits and drawbacks to using Zoom. For lower level classes, for those who are just beginning or not literate in another language, it's challenging to have that kind of good pedagogical experience via Zoom. However, many of the programs have found that they can reach more people and have great attendance. I think Kevin mentioned that attendance for your meetings when they were on Zoom was great. So there are and you can reach people who, a young parent has the kids at home, is on Zoom for class in the evening when they're in bed. There are those kinds of benefits. So it is you know, listen, did anyone imagine where we'd be with Zoom, you know, 3 years ago? I sure didn't. So, yeah, that's I should have mentioned that. Thank you for that question. So it's, yeah, I hope you all have stocking too.
Do people volunteer with your organization or are you using that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We have a volunteer listing on our webpage. At this computer distribution last week, we had 4 or 5 extra volunteers help us. Most of the best volunteering comes at the actual organizations. You can be assisting an instructor, you can be a volunteer tutor at some organizations. Happy to have interest. God bless you. If you have interest in that, we're happy to help facilitate some of that. We're going to set ourselves up. We haven't done this yet, but we will. For students from NCPS to get their service learning hours, to be able to do that. We just had have a variety of things that can be done.
So since the program started, as you did the evaluation of the program for the last 5 years, where it is going, it's increasing, where the areas of strategic planning is done.
Yeah, we do constant evaluation and strategy. We're in the midst of doing our next strategic plan. And not only do we evaluate ourselves, but all of our grant partners are required each year to give us a mid-year report and a final report that shows what they're working on with their programs. So it's a program development evaluation. And then they're also providing data to us on how many learners do they have that advance to the next level. So it's evaluating their success in those areas. We're a fairly data-driven organization. I'm about to get the hook. Thank you.